Okay, so does anyone want to share something, start with something? So it's more of a question and answer and sharing and testimony time than sort of some of the other sessions, but feel free.
Mike, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You had something on a Hangout, and you said you spoke to people's spirit.
Yeah.
And I'm more than interested because I got to. There's a 13-year-old that is autistic and other problems also, and God laid him on my heart, and I started praying for him, and I went in to somewhere, and I felt what he felt, I seen what he's seen, and I didn't know what to make of it. And about 3 weeks later, I prayed for him again, and I seen his spirit, and I told him, don't ask me how, but I didn't know how. I talked to him, his spirit, I seen it, and I said, Colby, we're going to court for you, and we're going to get you out. And he acknowledged, he was very happy, yes. And I was like blown away, and I thought, God, how can this be? So,
well, yeah. We are spirit, you know, and we can engage spirit to spirit, just like we can engage with God. Obviously, we have to do it with the right heart, motive, you know. But if someone's open and we look to engage, we can certainly engage that. When I was speaking to someone's spirit, it was really calling them into their destiny at a spirit level, because they couldn't really engage at their soul level. So when I was doing that, that's what I was really doing, because their spirit can hear, even if they're not hearing with their natural ears, or even if their soul is trying to block it out, their spirit can still hear. And a lot of the time you're looking for the spirit man to sort of rise up and to begin to engage, to sort of bypass the soul, or get the spirit in a position where it can at least take some stand. And a lot of people just don't know who they are, so you know they don't really know. And even when they get born again, their soul can be so so powerfully used to being in control that you have to call forth their true identity. And you know, there's a, I know Arthur Burke does a lot of stuff on that in terms of engaging the spirit and calling forth the spirit. But you know, God speaks to us. You know, He speaks to our spirit. That's where sort of deep calling to deep goes. It's not going to our soul. It's engaging with our spirit. And certainly, if God can do that, there's no reason why we shouldn't, in terms of speaking and calling it forth, you know, into that. So yeah, definitely no problem with that. So yeah.
thank you. I did look at Arthur Burke, because you mentioned that when you said that about speaking to someone's spirit, and I got a lot of information that'll help.
Yeah.
Another thing that happened about 12 years ago, which brought us to this point in our spiritual walk, was my wife and I were working in what we call the Hood in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Okay.
And God woke me up about 3 o'clock one morning, and He said, intercede. And I didn't know what interceding was at that point. And I said, intercede? He said, no, intercede, E-N-T-E-R, seed, S-E-E-D.
Yeah.
And that was questions all across my mind. And I said, when I started to say, what do you mean? I seen the faces of these people, prostitutes, drug addicts that we've been ministering to. One by one, their face come up in the spirit. And God put as God told Moses, I'll be with your mouth. I know what he means. He took it over. And so I started speaking what God had put in my mouth, and I guess 10 or 12 of those people come up. And that was it. And I thought, what had happened at 3 o'clock in the morning? So
Yeah.
that's sort of the journey my wife and I have been on.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, there's so much more than we've imagined or thought or recognized in the past, and God is just opening up completely new realms and avenues of understanding for us, so we can experience that. And I think it's those who are hungry, really hungry, and desiring. So the Spirit of the Lord really is looking. The seven spirits of God, they're looking, going to and fro throughout the earth, looking for hearts who are listening or open, or even got the desire to say, there must be more than this. I have to have more. And I think more and more of those people are being found. And a lot of people, they've given up on sort of religion, but they've not given up on God, and we have to reconnect them to, a personal encounter and experience with God, so that they can actually find out what the real God is, who He really is, rather than, how He has been portrayed, through, essentially that demonstration of what the enemy is trying to do. Really, is portray God as a harsh God, a distant God, a God who doesn't care, a God who's just looking to discipline and punish and all those things. And we have to present a loving God. Now, love isn't making excuses. Love is speaking the truth, and love is confronting, and He will do that, but He does everything in love, not in the way in which things have been portrayed. So I think everyone is essentially on a journey of discovery in these things. So awesome. Excellent.
Mike, I have a question.
Yeah.
Could you cover the courts in the areas that we can freely go to versus the areas that there's a time that we go into that we can't choose to go in? Can you cover those areas for me?
Yeah, I can certainly try. Anyway, yeah. When it comes to courts, I'm just trying to see if I can find a picture of it, so if we can. I'm not sure where we are here on that. Let me see if I can show you a picture so we can actually look at some of the different courts and what they do. Okay. So can you see that?
I got it.
Yeah. So you can see that picture on the screen. Okay. Well, okay, let's cut back so we can look at me.
It's blurry.
Okay. Is it? All right. Okay. Is it any better in a bigger film? No.
Not for. There you go. Wait. No.
No. All right.
You had it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in that sort of expression of the different realms of heaven, there are different engagements that we can make, and looking at it from the sort of bottom part of it, this is the realm of the earth and where that intersects, and the mobile court of accusation, where we tend to look to engage with the enemy, finding the accusations, getting things that can be convened around our lives. So it's convened in the spiritual atmosphere around us, as well as there being an activation of that in that realm. So we don't have to step into heaven in a sense, although we're stepping and engaging the spiritual realm to activate and operate in that court. And you know, it operates in right throughout the realms of heaven, but in that sense, you know, we convene it. There also, within the realm of the kingdom of God, you have the court of war, strategy, council, where we can present our mandates and the things that God's called us to do, and get revelation of what we're supposed to do with it from a strategic perspective. Some of that may be a heavenly perspective, some of it may be an earthly perspective, and then there's the court of angels, where we can again present our mandates, and where angelic orders or different angels will volunteer or be participating in when they see authority from God. So in essence, we have access to those courts when we're engaged on our mountain in the realm of heaven, and when you've been there and it's part of your pathway, then you can go there just instantly by engaging it, by turning your consciousness towards it and engaging it in faith. It will activate, and you can engage in there. Now, obviously, when we're learning to do this, there are certain things that we have to understand. You know, we don't go into a court and go in belligerently or go in with an attitude which is out of order. We go in a respectful way. When you go to a court, you have to treat the court with respect. Otherwise, it's you know, there's a contempt of court type of thing. We don't want to treat the court in a wrong way. Now, all those courts are accessed when we're on our mountain and when we're operating in that realm. Now, you can also access the other courts as you are directed or empowered or shown. You know, sometimes, you know, God has shown me things, taken me places, wisdom has taken to me places, so that I can engage in those places, those dimensions of those places. And what I've found is that when I was invested with a higher level of authority in kingship, and I was given this orb, that enabled me to access the other realms. Now, when you access, say, the court of scribes, there are various things that you can engage in there. Everything is recorded in the court of scribes. So, in essence, when you engage there, you can engage your scroll and the record of your life, and you can access that scroll to see what's on it. And I'm not talking about your scroll of destiny. I'm talking about the scroll which is written as you live your life. And that may have gold, silver, and precious stones, at times where you've been obedient to God. It may also have wood, hay, and stubble, times where you have done things in your own strength or for your own motives. And that's something that you can find out and deal with in the judgment seat of Christ and get it purified. But everything's in there. So you can go into the court of scribes and find legislation written. You can go and look for your area or your city or for your blueprint, and you can find things that have been prophesied or called into being. You can find things that are recorded there that have happened, and you can use that information to legislate or bring change or deal with in the courts certain things. So it's a very useful place to be able to engage. You have the Court of Chancellors, which is really about getting authorization for specific things. And I've taken laws there, had them sealed, and then taken them to the Court of Scribes and get them put into record. So there's a process. Court of Kings is where I've engaged in the Court of Kings, and I've produced legislation out of my own spirit rather than been given legislation. And so sometimes you have legislation and the Court of Chancellors will authorize you to use that legislation or to bring that legislation into current law, if you like, within your setting, within your sphere. And we've done that for us as a church, and we have produced legislation which has already been established but was revealed to us for our use, and we went through that process of engaging the Chancellor's Court, getting it authorized, taking it into the Court of Scribes, putting it into our record for our use, for our ecclesia. It may not be that anyone else can use it or have a record of its use, but we can because we have gone through the process. When I brought legislation from the Court of Kings, took it to the Court of Chancellors, got it authorized, took it actually to the Court of Scribes, got it put into record, I didn't fully understand then what to do. So I took it to our bench of three, and our bench of three, we stepped in and we went to the strategy court, and we got a strategy of what we should do to bring that into use. And he showed us about getting earthly agreement and then bringing that earthly agreement back into the court and decreeing it. And so there are certain things there that we have access to. I've also been able to release that legislation in other places as I've felt led to do so. So there's things there. When I've engaged some of the higher realm courts, like the Court of the Councils of the Fathers, I was taken there by wisdom, and I find that wisdom is very, very helpful in helping us learn the protocols, taking us through the processes, and helping us understand. The Court of the Councils of the Father is a place where the top three level courts, Court of 70, the Court of the Lord, and the Court of Judges, they administrate into the Court of the Councils of the Fathers. So you have the throne of God there, but you also have the two sets of 12 elders, and there's a, I can't say I've been in there a lot, but when I have, it's been quite significant. And you've got the Court of the Upright, which are where the men in white linen are, and again, you can engage that so that they can be involved in particular aspects of your destiny or your church. I mean, again, wisdom took me there, and there were 7 thrones or 12 thrones, and they each had a men in white linen attached to it, and we were told that they were there to be a reference for us. So people have particularly engaged with them who felt that that's one they engage with. So in a sense, all these places are open, some of them by invitation. It's like, you can't just march into the Court of 70 and begin to make demands and things. There's protocol. You have to learn how to present a case, but they operate very differently. It's not, the mobile court is a court where there's a judge and where there's a verdict given, and then you can use that verdict and you can get court orders. The Court of Angels isn't like that at all. The Court of Angels is a place where you present things to the angelic court and angels participate. The Court of War there's not a judge in the Court of War. There's a table, a sort of strategy table that you can present things on. There's not a judge in the Court of Chancellors. There are chancellors sat there. Now, some of these places are places where we need to learn how to administrate there. We can use the court to get things authorized, but we're supposed to have charge of the courts, therefore to be able to operate there in the court. So, I've sat in the Court of Chancellors, and I've had people bring things to there, being sat as part of a bench of chancellors, and passed sort of a judgment on what was brought, quite a number of times. So ultimately, having charge of the courts is not just knowing how to use them, but actually being involved in operating them effectively. Now, I think there's a lot more to learn about that. If you want to know what goes on in a court, then I would go to wisdom and ask for insight, or I would set the desires of my heart on it and then ask Jesus to take you there and show you. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can do everything and you have all the authority, but it's a learning process. So often the courts have a gallery in the court that you can go and be a witness and see what goes on, so that you can get an understanding of what goes on. So it's definitely a whole judicial system of the kingdom that we need to understand how to be involved and how to use. Otherwise, essentially, we will not be able to fully function in the government that we are called to govern, because this is how heaven works. God has established these court systems so that the kingdom will function no differently, in a sense. All the earthly governments are patterned after a heavenly government, even if some of them aren't necessarily very accurate. They still carry judicial authority if they have any sense of a kingdom that is administrated. And any government, your government has different departments: the Department of State and the Department of War, and you have the Education Department, and you have the Agriculture Department, and all sorts of departments that actually are different aspects of government. And in a sense, these courts are part of how heaven works. There's many other places that you can engage and many other things that you can do, but these are the basic pattern of how heavenly government works and how we legislate using that authority, so that that authority is released onto the earth. So that's some of it. I don't believe anyone is forbidden to go to any of those places, but until you're familiar with the pathways and they become your pathways, then sometimes you won't necessarily be able to participate. But as you learn, the more we will. And as you learn how to effectively use strategy and to understand the protocols of what you do and how you do it, then the more participation is active. But I think there is a level that if we're faithful with operating in the kingdom of God area, and we begin to deal with that there to take our authority there, then often we get, in a sense, exalted to a higher level. It talks about wisdom exalting us, lifting us up to a higher level of authority, so that we can do things differently. Although I would say, honestly, in any encounter, you may be led to any of those things involuntarily, because you may be being led to understand it or learn about it. It's when you have it as part of your life, then you can go there when you are led to by your spirit, and when you need to go there for a particular purpose, and that's very different. Yeah.
And this is wisdom versus wisdom in the seventh heaven.
Yeah, I mean, this is wisdom. The seven spirits of God will help in engagement with various things and may give you insight, but wisdom is specifically there to help, according to Proverbs, help kings reign, and about rulers and nobles, princes. So there's levels of authority that each of us can engage with, that essentially wisdom helps us with. So it's very much a mentoring, tutoring, helping us understand the protocols of heaven, and that's something I've learned to engage regularly. And some of my involuntary encounters she's been involved in, which has then springboarded me into actively pursuing that and going back into it, so that I can outwork that in my own life. Often I'll get something happen to me which I've never been before, or I don't understand, but I then use that. I use that as a springboard to effectively lead me into understanding it. Because I figure if God wants to show me something as a new encounter, then He wants me to understand what it's about and what I'm supposed to do with it. Otherwise, He wouldn't have done it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Anyone else got anything they want to share or ask?
Yeah, Mike. Last time we met, we were talking about the judging angels. There is really something to that. Yeah. I was ministering to a lady, speaking a blessing over a project, given creative project that she had completed. So, and I was making righteous judgments. All of a sudden, her angel stepped forward and asked to be judged. And I was like, whoa. You know, I judge my angels, but I was not expecting to be put in a position to judge her angels. I mean, they were, excited and, wanted to be judged. So I, again, judged them humble and righteous and, adequate and all of a sudden acute, too. I judged them acute. And it was just really a strange, new, it's just very new.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Nope. No thoughts or?
Well, I think you're pursuing something which is very clearly a biblical principle of judging angels, and you're doing it from a very positive perspective to bring validation to what they're doing and to honor them and respect them, in the right way. So, yeah, I've got no issue with it whatsoever. I think generally, I think we tend to see judgment as a negative thing when it isn't, and this is an instance where I think we tend to think of judging angels as only being the bad ones and not the good ones. And so, in a judgment with the good ones, then we're actually just judging them good, and what they're doing, they've done well, and we're giving them the praise they deserve. Now, they're not replacing God. We're not worshiping them. But why shouldn't creative beings be respected and honored? God has created them for a purpose. I mean, I honor wisdom because God created her for a very clear purpose, and I honor her in that role, in how God has created her. And the same with the seven spirits of God and all the others. There's a sense of, we honor them. When we honor someone, we're able to receive from them. That's what honor is about. The thing where Jesus said, well, if you receive a prophet in the name of a prophet, then you receive a prophet's reward. And that's about honoring the prophet's office, in a sense, so that you can then receive from that person. And if we dishonor and disrespect people, then we can't receive from them. In fact, we wouldn't want to receive from them because of our attitude towards them. So it's really about presenting an attitude, the correct attitude towards God, towards the realm that he's created, towards the courts that he's created, to have the right attitude towards all of that so that we essentially get the best out of it all. And that's definitely something that I think you've sort of struck something there, and we need to be willing to pursue it, without a doubt. Yeah.
It certainly has created some type of buzz, and they're very, very excited to volunteer and very active. They just rush a situation, and I'm like, whoa, people, I'm ministering to people, and they're like, what was that? And I'm like, it's just a rush of angels wanting to be assigned and volunteering. It's like there's such an excitement in this season for them participating with what's going on. I haven't experienced this before.
Yeah, and again, I think that's an example of coming into something new, a new perspective, a new understanding, a new revelation, which then starts to be fruitful, and you see the purpose for engaging it in that sense. So yeah, keep going with it and keep sharing your testimonies around it, because I'm sure it's going to encourage people to understand a little bit more about how to engage the angelic realm with that perspective, so that we do, they want to be around us rather than not, because they're not attracted to negative atmospheres, which is why we need to look to create the atmosphere of the kingdom around us in a positive sense of the river of life flowing through us, and in a sense presenting life in that way, because the angels will be attracted and drawn to that. That's why certain engagements attract them, and I think if we hold them in the regard that they should be held, without going to any way worshipping angels, because we don't, then we will find that we get the reward for engagement with them, and having that attitude certainly helps, I think. So great. Keep sharing testimonies. It'll be interesting to see how it progresses. Okay.
I have found some of the same things that Pam has when we're doing intercession, and then we go to the Court of Angels, and we even ask for extra volunteers besides those that are assigned to this particular mandate. They get excited. They want to volunteer. They want to participate. I think it's like Ian Clayton says, they've been bored for a while. And when the prayer room that we run, sort of like a soaking prayer center, when we were gone for a couple weeks and we came back, because no one at our church does any of the stuff that we do. And but I make sure to, when I walk in the church, say greetings to the angels of this church, and recognize them and give them honor. They actually, when we were gone for a couple weeks, came to the prayer room and said, "We missed you." And I think they missed the praise and the worship. They missed, just like in heaven. It's heaven on earth, and it's such a wonderful thing. And I was really surprised by that.
Yeah, but so I think we seem to treat them like they haven't got personality or feelings or emotions or anything else, but they have. They're created beings, spiritual beings, but they still have personality. They still have. They were created by God to reflect Him, so they have personality and emotion. So. They're not quite like ours, but they are very much active. So, they would miss being involved in certain things. And they do get excited, and they do look into, and they wonder, and, they see us, in some senses, as a bit of a mystery. And I think, we are really sometimes, in terms of how we are, but yeah, it's good. Okay. Who else wants to share something or ask anything?
Mike, I've got a question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I had heard on a hangout a while back, and it piqued my interest, that there's been a lot of persecution, obviously, for stepping out into this new order, this new way. And in East Tennessee, we don't, we're really in a Bible Belt. So we've been with your group since July, and we've been able to keep a really low profile. But the more we step into this realm, the more it's becoming more and more like us. So we can't hide it anymore. It's becoming a lifestyle for us. So I had my first encounter yesterday of somebody that had come up from Atlanta and met with somebody that's within our organization and had been to one of Ian's conferences and brought a lot of venom and released it. So I spent about an hour and a half on a call driving yesterday while I was traveling, and just really kind of diffusing that situation. And I had remembered this morning when I was in prayer that you had stated that in your within your church you have a group of people that declare every morning that building a wall of protection around what it is that you're doing, and you've really suffered very little persecution, and I want to know more about that. I felt like the Lord was showing me this morning that we need to build a perimeter and a wall around us, because we're stepping into this in mid-March is where we're going to be opening our doors basically for the model. And right now we're in a position, God has been so gracious, just as a testimony to what you were talking about earlier, to allow us into the courts based on your testimony. And we've gone in as a bench of 3, and And often I'm kind of a left brain, so I take what I learn, and that's the portal, but I get a little stuck in the sense that, well, no, wait a minute, Mike said we have to go this way or this way, and wisdom has been very gracious to show us when her way, her way is not our way. So we've really submitted to her, and she is, and she's bringing us the protocols that you've taught us are right, but we're missing pieces. So she's having to take us to different places to pull those things in. So she has honored us in an amazing way and allowed us to bring the things that we've brought forth into the right places in the courts. But God kind of stalled us about 6 weeks ago, and what he wanted, we've been able to accomplish a lot as a bench of three in the realm of autism and where he's got us our blueprints. But he stalled us about 6 weeks ago because he wanted this to start to work in our own lives. So we've pulled back, and we're putting and applying everything that we're learning to see the fruit established in our own lives, because we can't bring that to anybody else if it's not working in our lives. So that's kind of where we're sitting. So this kind of came out of left field a little bit for me, but I realized that I need to know more about that and need to understand exactly how to build a wall or how to release the angelic, obviously through declarations and those types of things.
Okay. Well, we as a bench of three, we were meeting together, and we'd stepped into heaven, and we were looking at some things that God was calling us to engage with, and we were engaging that, and we saw, particularly, I saw the enemy as a pretty fierce-looking sea creature. In fact, it looked like a sea creature, and it was coming with its mouth really open and sort of plowing through the sea, and then it just hit up against this invisible shield, and it just went splat because it couldn't see it. And one of the other benches also had a vision in the encounter of a dome over us. So we shared this together, and then we asked for a strategy. What is that? How do we see that take place? Is it already in place, or are we seeing something that we need to put in place? So we went to get a strategy, and we were told that each of our 7 mountains and our bench of 7 needed to seek God for declarations that they should make, and each of the benches that were involved with that would be part of the shield. They would be part of creating that shield of protection, each of them bringing their aspect to it. So and so it's not that one declaration covers everything. Each of our mountains has their own spheres of authority, and their declarations cover that sphere as part of our overall protection. Now, in a sense, we're not really looking for opposition or backlash or anything like that, because we don't really believe being in faith for anything negative. We believe in being positive, so we're believing God's favor and provision and protection. But He does sometimes give you a strategy of what to do, and of course that really encouraged all our benches to go and engage God for themselves, to see, okay, this is the authority we have. These are the declarations we've been given to cover this area, and use that authority in a positive way. So it reinforced everyone's sense of authority and hearing God and creating declarations, and each mountain created a set of declarations that they brought together themselves. They published them, brought it back to our bench of 12, and we have them all there. And the way in which we function is that once one group has something like that, then we all benefit from it, because we're all part of the same. So we encourage them to seek God about what they should do, and they found that certain benches did it differently. Certain benches, they all declare the same things every day. Some some of their three. One declares one aspect, another aspect. You know, that's up to their strategy for how they do it, but they do it. And we, you know, we believe that creates a shield. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have things you have to sort out, but it does give you a protective sense, because you're in faith for those declarations. You know, you're living in the good of them because you know they're being made, and you're aware of the reality of what it is that's making that. So yeah, we've certainly found that's been something that's been helpful to us. Again, it's all part of the journey, people learning to grow and embrace things and learn you know, in a different way to do these things. You know, they're all doing it from a heavenly perspective, so they're declaring those things from their mountain benches, you know, from the thrones there. So, you know, it was all part of our journey of moving from, you know, an old to a new way of doing things. So intercession, prayer, you know, we don't have prayer meetings and things like that anymore. Because we're engaging with God. You know, it's all prayer. We're talking to Him, listening to Him, getting truth, doing what He's calling us to do. But it's not, oh well, we're coming to, you know, for us to, in a sense, asking God to do something. No, we're not asking God to do anything. What we're asking God is for the revelation of what He wants us to do, and I think that's the big shift. So we're not coming with a prayer list, or we have, you know, sort of particular prayer things. You know, we engage God, we get a mandate, we outwork that mandate because He's given us authority to do it. So we are asking, seeking, and knocking, but we're asking Him to reveal to us what He's actually authorizing us to do, not what we want Him to do for us. Because that's sort of maturing to a point where we are involved in the governmental aspects of the kingdom and establishing our own perimeter and shield and protection and everything else, because we have the authority to do so. You know, if we're operating as a city of refuge, there may well be all sorts of things going on outside of our walls, but we have walls of fire which things can't be penetrated. And if you believe, you have to, in a sense, you have to stand in faith on that truth. But I believe that, you know, we will not be subject to the earthly things that go on in terms of the laws that operate. We have a higher law, we have a heavenly law, so we can live in health, we can live in provision, we can live in blessing and favor. We can live in everything that God is providing us for us in terms of His promises, but we have to administrate those things. They're not automatic. You know, if you don't, you know, and some of it is sending angels. I mean, some of the declarations are about having angelic protection. You know, one of our bench a while ago had a clear direction from God to look to the north. Look to the north gate, and he looked to the north gate, and he had this vision, seeing people come, and some of the people who were coming were coming from the enemy, and a lot of people weren't. They were coming because they were being drawn. So it was very much, how do we discern between those that the enemy is trying to send to us and those that are being drawn because God is sending them? So he assigned some angelic presence to guard that gate and to, you know, stop anyone who was not authorized to come in. And so it was a very specific thing that he was told to do, which he did, and, you know, told us about it, and we were all in agreement. Yeah, great. That's a thing, because I know the north gate is always a significant gate where the enemy tries to penetrate through the north gate. So you have to make sure you have that north gate protected. And sometimes it is physical, in a geographical sense, but often it's a spiritual dimension where, you know, the enemy biblically usually attacks from the north, but it's sensing that that's where there's an access point. And if you look at the the different where God manifests, things usually flow out of the east gate, and the river flows out from the east gate. So there are certain patterns biblically that are spiritual principles that you begin to work with, and that's certainly one of them. So we've definitely done a lot of engagement in that way. So I mean, if you think of all the all the stuff that we do and all the stuff we put out there, we get very, very little negative comments. I mean, I think we've had in terms of YouTube video hits or something, it's like, I don't know, 500,000 hits or something, and I think there are something like 15 negative ones or something, and all those were just dislikes, and I have no idea what it meant, but that is quite a low rate.
Well, that's very, very, very helpful. The way that got in, we don't talk about Ian, but we talk about you, and they had connected in to you, and so that's where that kind of came in at. But what I realized was that I spent an enormous amount of time when, I need to be about the Father's business, not about, distractions and those types of things. And we will have, that is great information, because we're going to be bringing 7 families in, and, we have to be so, we need to have all of that, the shield up, the perimeter up, because we know that we just need to be extremely discerning in understanding exactly who God is drawing. We send the call out and the frequency, and we see what God is bringing in, and we can pretty much discern who He's calling in and who He's not. And we're not soliciting these families. We're not going out looking for them. We're just believing the Lord to bring them to us. But we also need to have those shields up in place for the plans of the enemy. It's his job. His job is to rob, kill, steal, and destroy. So we just want to be proactive and not have to get on the defense, because that really, yesterday I realized what a waste of time that was, to be doing that. But thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't mind talking to people who have genuine concerns, or they have a religious spirit, and that's sort of bringing things. I don't mind talking, answering people's questions, whatever, but you can pick up those who really are just antagonistic, and they're not really looking for answers. They just want to put you right, and I'm not really interested in engaging with people who just want to be self-righteous and prove right. If someone wants to debate, say, look, can you explain this? I don't understand this. I never saw it like that. That's certainly not my experience. Can you talk to me about it? I think fair enough. But you tend to find that those that really are just coming in as self-righteous, policing the kingdom for God, come with a critical spirit towards people. And you pick that up really quickly. And they come with that critical spirit rather than a willingness to seek the truth. And so for those people who just want to argue and tell you where you're wrong, then there's no point getting involved with that. What we've did is to make sure that we don't come under any political spirit. Jesus warned about the leaven of Herod and the Pharisees. So the religious spirit and the political spirit. And the religious spirit essentially comes through those religious doctrinal things. That's not right. This isn't right. You can't do that because the Bible doesn't say that, and it's not in the Bible, and all that type of stuff is usually a religious spirit. But a political spirit is always out to argue and wants to gain a position of power over you, and we found very clearly because we were attacked by a political spirit, that and a religious spirit. There was a mixture in it, but we asked God to show us what it was, and we had to ask for a strategy of how to deal with it. and it was challenging the teaching that we were doing, but it was doing it in a way which was unrighteous, because this person had sort of confronted me and sort of said, look, you know, I don't believe this, you're teaching people wrongly. So we said, okay, come and talk to us, and we'll discuss it with you. We'll share, you know, what our perspective is, and we'll work it through. But they weren't prepared to do that. They wanted to talk to everybody else, so they went around that invitation. They started emailing other people, trying to get people on their side, trying to get support, trying to create confusion, that type of thing. And, you know, most of it was directed towards me. So I sort of, you know, said, okay, well, what's the biblical thing we should do? Well, okay, the guy has not listened to us in what we've asked him to do. We've been reasonable. We want to talk to him. He doesn't want to talk. He's still doing what we've asked him not to do. You know, the biblical thing is, well, okay, let's bring that before the church, and if he's unwilling to respond correctly, then we'll ask him to leave. Now that would have been my normal response. Not that I've ever done that with anybody, but that would have been, hey, kid, the Bible says, you know, if people are doing this, you know, you have a right to do this. But because I was in a place of, well, I'm being attacked here, I asked the other two of the bench to bring wisdom into the situation. So they sought God, and they came up with a strategy from God of what we should do. And so we didn't challenge this guy in that way. What we decided we'd do, we're not going to argue with him. We're not going to justify his arguments by entering into a battle or a fight with him. We're going to make a statement of what we believe, why we believe it, and we're going to stand on it. So we shared this statement with him, said, this is what we believe, this is why we believe it, and we left it. And then he then started to try and argue, and we just said, we refer you to the previous statement, this is what we believe. We're not going to get in an argument with you. And eventually it's like all the support, and because people just saw through, because when you do that and you don't give it an argument, you don't give it a fight, you don't come in an opposite spirit, you know, in a sense, or the same spirit to confront it, it has no argument, and it then gets more and more extreme and tries to do more and more, you know, extreme things. And we found that people just recognized it, and God moved him on. You know, he moved on to another place, got a job somewhere else. But we were able to pray with him when he left. We were able to bless him on his way. You know, if we'd said, look, actually, we don't think this is the best place for you anymore, we think you need to find somewhere where you do agree with what they're teaching, he would have been able to say, oh, they don't allow any difference of views there, blah, blah, blah. So we short-circuited all the political stuff that the enemy was trying to put in place by getting a direct strategy from God. And even though it wasn't something that I would have thought of initially, our other two of the bench really were very wise in it, and because I was the one under attack, sometimes it's hard to actually, when you're in that situation, see what the right thing is to do. And so I said, okay, I'm going to trust that you will hear God in this situation, so we'll really, you know, and I had total agreement with them when they brought this strategy, and it totally worked, you know, and we didn't allow the political spirit to operate. Now, when it's on the outside of you, you're okay, but when it's within a member of the church, obviously that creates a difficult scenario. So we had to have an insight into how it worked, but we did find that it actually worked out well, and you know, the guy himself actually thanked us for all the stuff that we had done and all the worship and stuff which he liked and everything else. So in a sense, actually, we were able to bless him. And we obviously had to forgive him and release him and make sure our hearts were right to him all the way, because that's the foundation to everything. You must have a heart of forgiveness and love. So even though he was saying things, we still loved him, you know, and we didn't try and shut him up. We just wouldn't argue with him, and therefore no one else would argue with him, so he didn't have an argument, therefore there was nothing to be right over, you know, because the political spirit always wants to be proved right. And if you don't have an argument, there is nothing to be proved right over, and so that was the strategy of how we dealt with that. So anyway.
Yeah, the person that brought this, her heart was so right. She was so, and it was out of love. Yeah. It was out of concern, genuine concern and genuine love. But what you just said was very helpful, because as an organization, we need to get on what do we believe. You know, what
Yeah.
do we believe, and make sure we stand on that, and that will cut out a lot of this other stuff. But that's extremely helpful. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. Okay, I need to leave.